Hello YouTube, this is my appropriate Exodia deck, and I am going to explain to you why I have the stuff in here the way I do, along with how to properly set this up. Okay, so we're going to start off with traps and 3 appropriate. Now, every time your opponent draws with this, every time your opponent draws outside of their draw phase, this card allows you to draw 2 extra cards. So most of this deck is set up to to not only have you draw, but also to have your opponent draw. That way you get 2 extra cards to your draws. So first comes those 3, then 3 Reckless Greed, just in case. One Transmigration of Prophecy. If your opponent, if somehow you end up getting your pieces in the grave and you run out of ways to get them back, or more importantly, you just don't have those ways yet, you can use this. Or you can put cards from your opponent's deck back, or 1 card from each. Or you can just use it as a way to get stuff out of your hand. If you need to discard something, this is a good card to discard if needed, but there are multiple ways to use it in the deck as well. Then there are 2 Thunder of Ruler. It's a good way to protect yourself for a turn, and with this deck, it's a great way to set up. So next comes 2 Reload, 3 Cup of Ace. Now, I know there's a drawback with Cup of Ace because of the luck, but in this deck, that's not really a problem. You set up Appropriate, depending on the amount, depends on how many you can get extra when your opponent draws. You have 1 out, you draw 2 either way. 2 out, 4 cards if your opponent ends up drawing. And the other way, your opponent doesn't draw and you still get 2. So, same with 3, but I'm just doing this quickly to explain. 2 Drag Down to the Grave. These are in here until I can find my dealings, but it's still a good way to work because I have ways to get cards back in here. Besides just Transmigration of Prophecy. But still, with Appropriate, you draw extra cards off of it because your opponent is still drawing. Hand Destruction. Same thing with Drag Down, except this time you get to choose what you get rid of. And instead of 1 card from where Drag Down gives it to you normally, you get 2 normally. So with Appropriate, you automatically get 4. As long as it's there. 2 Swords of Revealing Light. Just to protect yourself for a little while if needed. 2 Pot of Duality. You're not really going to be special summoning in this deck, so it helps a lot. 2 Dark Factory of Mass Production. These are in here because the way I do it, I usually try to get rid of my pieces from this deck. I have more than enough ways to get them back, and I don't get rid of all my pieces anyways. I get rid of just enough to set myself up for the rest of the duel. As I just said, with the Dark Factory, I use Foolish Burial so that I can set up if needed. Whether I need to get rid of the head, which I do have another way to get that back, and I'm getting into that in a minute, or I get rid of one of the pieces and set up for another move, I have that. Monster Reincarnation. This is usually how I'll get back the head if I get rid of it. I don't usually get rid of it, but it's a good way. Or if I only have 1 piece in the grave and I have everything else already set up, I have that as well. What I want to get my hands on for this deck, and you might want to look into it yourself, is Dark Eruption. But for now, this is how I have it set up. 1 Day of Peace. I've already explained with the extra draws how cards are helpful. 1 Day of Peace. Most of you already know how this works. Appropriate makes it that much better. And just in case, Mystical Space Typhoon. Your opponent sets up, you know what to do. I'm getting into the monsters now. Obviously, because of what I already said this deck is, you want the 5 pieces of Exodia. Five pieces of Exodia. Then I run 3 Destiny Hero Defender. Defender's a 27 defense, a 2,700 defense monster, and every time during each of your opponent's standby phases, while this card is face up in defense, they draw a card. So Appropriate really works with this. This is, in my opinion, one of the easiest ways to work with Appropriate. If you can't get something else to protect yourself. I mean, it's not really the easiest way, but it's one of the best ways, in my opinion. In fact, that's part of the reason why I wanted to build this deck in the first place. Now, 3 valleys. 3 Cyber Valleys. And last but not least, Cyber Phoenix. Now, Cyber Phoenix is in here not only because of its regular effect for during battle, but also because of its effect for when it's destroyed. So your opponent will easily help you unless they destroy it by card effect or something, but that you'll always have to deal with.